Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. We have tremendous turnout for this program today, which is incredibly gratifying and certainly confirming the importance of this topic. This is actually the second impact sourcing webinar we've hosted in partnership with the Global Impact Sourcing Coalition. The first one was held in June 2017, and if you're interested in hearing that one, it is available for replay in IAOP's knowledge set. For those of you who may be new to IAOP, and before I turn the session over to our moderator, I'd like to give you just a brief overview of IAOP's efforts and our commitment to the promotion of impact sourcing and the support of our members involved in either buying or delivering services in the impact sourcing space. For those of you who have been in the outsourcing industry for a while, we know the term outsourcing had a negative connotation in many cases, and no amount of explanation could change that opinion in a lot of people's minds. But when IAOP connected with the Rockefeller Foundation in support of impact sourcing way back, I believe it was in 2014, as the foundation launched its Digital Jobs Africa initiative, with it came an opportunity for us to promote outsourcing in a new light. And we learned that not only could we do good, but that impact sourcing was also a very smart way to do business. We have continued to believe in this, and as the definition and scope of impact sourcing has evolved, and we can see the benefit within our own communities, IAOP's commitment continues to grow. This year, at our annual Outsourcing World Summit held in Orlando, IAOP, in partnership with the Rockefeller Foundation, presented the second annual Global Impact Sourcing Awards and was honored to recognize the 4 organizations you will get the opportunity to hear from shortly. This was a daunting process for our dedicated panel of judges from IAOP's CSR committee, as so many established as well as new companies are doing such great work, such forward-thinking work in the area of impact sourcing. We also honored the 4 winners who received the award at the 2018 summit and who have recertified this year. The award nominations process will open again in late summer, early fall, and I encourage you to consider applying and showcase your work. And from this very active CSR committee under the leadership of John Browning, who is CEO of Strategic Sourcing Advisors, and I'm sure most of you know him, comes the launch of IAOP's Social Responsibility and Outsourcing chapter. This chapter, due to hold its first meeting this summer, early summer I'm hoping, will provide a community as well as a content-rich forum for those who are involved in or interested in learning more about impact sourcing, to hear from others as well as share their impact sourcing success stories. And as we continue to build this community, you'll see more of these success stories at all of IAOP's events. For us at IAOP, probably not so much for you, but for us, OWS 20 is just around the corner and planning has already begun. Time sure flies when you're having fun, as I love to say. And last but certainly not least, IAOP joined the Global Impact Sourcing Coalition as a founding associate member, and it has been a privilege to watch the coalition make tremendous strides in such a short time. It continues to be an honor to work with the coalition, and it's now my pleasure to introduce Sara Enright, the coalition's director, tremendous supporter of IAOP, and moderator of today's panel. It's all yours, Sara.
Thank you, Debbie, for such a generous introduction. My name is Sara Enright. I'm the director of the Global Impact Sourcing Coalition, which is housed by BFR. I am delighted today to be moderating a discussion with the Global Impact Sourcing Award winners, which you guys are in for a real treat. You're going to be hearing the stories of companies that have really taken huge strides to advance inclusive employment across supply chains over the past couple of years in partnership with IAOP and the Global Impact Sourcing Coalition. With that, I would love to, I'm going to be, the way that we'll moderate this is we'll be introducing each of these speakers in turn. Each speaker will have an opportunity to present for approximately 10 minutes their award-winning initiative. And then we will move on to a Q&A after the presentations are over. If there's a particular question that you'd like to submit during their presentations or for a particular panelist, please go ahead and submit that question via the chat feature on the Zoom platform. And I will keep my eye out for those questions and try and prioritize those as best I can. We are going to do the most of the presentation today of our awardee winners, and I will close out with a little bit of information about how you might get involved with impact sourcing and this community of practice through the Impact Sourcing Coalition. So with that, I am delighted to kick off with Jennifer Johnston, who's the partner manager of Intuit. And if you could click forward a slide, Jennifer, please to introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Jen Johnston. I am, as Sarah mentioned, a partner manager at Intuit, one of three for our organization. I am also the primary impact sourcing leader for our business. And so I have 3 slides. I'll go through them today and then would love to connect with anyone that would like to chat more. Intuit's overall mission is to power prosperity around the world through supporting our small business customers, self-employed, and of course our consumers. Those products that we support, some of which people are very familiar with because it's quite that time of year to be talking about products like TurboTax, but for some folks, QuickBooks, ProConnect, and Mint are also products that some may not be aware that we also support. Our project Mission Hope is really around how do we power prosperity around the world differently than we've thought about in the past. And for me, this is exactly how Intuit talks about impact sourcing is really powering prosperity. And the idea is that 1 out of 6 Americans live in these distressed communities. And up until about 2.5 years ago, we weren't in a single one of these communities. And so we set out on a journey to make that happen, and we've done some really great work that we're really proud of, and we also know that there's more work to do. The second side of that, though, is if we don't do this right, it will be highly costly, and that's not what we're in the business of doing, is spending money. So quite honestly, we needed to take a look at how we just grow in distressed communities, but also do right by our stakeholders with Intuit. We have an opportunity with attrition in our business. As you guys can imagine, during tax season, we double our workforce for small business, and we more than quadruple our workforce for consumers in the TurboTax space. If you think about it, they only need really our help once or twice a year, and it's typically in the April timeframe. And so our goal was also to set out and figure out a way to make these distressed community opportunities more of a career path and create consistent job functions that would reduce attrition and improve the lives of individuals within these communities. Next slide, please. So some of the things that we've learned, first is we have currently 900 active folks working in 2 of our key distressed communities, which is Wise, Virginia, and Johnstown, Pennsylvania. And in the middle there, you will see the things that have changed as a result of going into these communities. We've seen a significant improvement in attrition because of the loyalty of the workforce in these areas. Before our work came into these areas, folks unfortunately could not commit long term for one reason or another. They were in school and they were looking for a career, and so they would need to move away in order to find that. We've been able to keep those individuals in and create career development opportunities within the roles that they're performing in order to enrich their life. The other thing is we've seen an improvement in our customer-facing experiences. These individuals are staying around, increasing tenure, and really impressing our customers and creating deep information structures that have now been beneficial to our customers. And these locations are actually our highest performing locations across the business and have some of the best, of course, overall results in other areas. Next slide, please. So going forward, what we're up to is we want to expand. We feel really great about 900 jobs in 2.5 years, but we think we can do even more than that. And so we plan to accelerate that, and we have some very lofty goals that we will very much look different in even 3 months from now that we're really excited about. We will also look at extending our product and capabilities to think about ways to make these communities have a self-sustainable ecosystem that allows us to operate year-round. For example, if there's an opportunity for someone in the TurboTax workforce space to simply slide into the small business QBO or QuickBooks space, we want them to be able to do that. And so we keep more workforce employed through our partners year-round and create those amazing career opportunities. And last, we have officially folded into its corporate responsibility strategy for these communities. And what that means is there are 3 pillars of corporate responsibility. One is to create jobs and skills to underserved communities. We're doing that, we're going to do more of that, and so that folds in nicely. The second is around financial well-being, however. There is a significant amount of data that goes into quality of life and financial freedom and ensuring that we build financial literacy skills for youth within these. And so we've set out on a journey to make that happen in these communities and beyond as well. And then, of course, lastly, it's to improve small business success by enabling more business know-how and, of course, access to credit through another Intuit offering. And so this is what we plan to do going forward: expand and also leverage our corporate responsibility pillars to make this even more successful. And that's all I have to share.
Thank you so much, Jenny. I think this is a really exceptional example of a buyer representative of impact sourcing, a company that is sourcing in a socially responsible and high impact way in partnership with its suppliers. Next, we're going to hear from 2 impact sourcing service providers to hear their perspective on why impact sourcing is both a great way to do sourcing partnerships, but also to have impact on the communities that you are sourcing from. I'm going to hand over to Leila Jana, who's the founder and CEO of Samasource. Next slide, please.
Thanks. Hi, this is Leila Jana. Nice to speak with you all. So I come at this from a slightly different perspective. I worked in the aid industry and for various NGOs after spending time in Africa when I was 17. And I realized that for me, global poverty is something that I want to spend my life working on. And I felt really frustrated that a lot of the traditional approaches were not solving the root problem, which is low household incomes for the poorest people in the world. So I really think we have a social justice opportunity to change the way we think about business and supply chain and address that problem, which is the root cause of so many of the problems we're trying to solve through charity, whether it's maternal mortality, 300,000 women still dying each year in childbirth, mostly due to poverty. I think 99% of those deaths are due to poverty, or lack of clean drinking water, or so many of the other problems where again, we're trying to solve too far downstream. So I came upon this concept working in the outsourcing industry as a management consultant back in 2005, and then thought, wow, wouldn't it be cool if we could build an organization in sub-Saharan Africa that would not only create digital work opportunities, but specifically target people who were living below the poverty line and then give them living wage jobs. So for me, impact sourcing means we're hiring people who are genuinely marginalized, so they're living below a standard, of poverty, and we have a lot of data around that. And then secondly, and this is really critical, that we're not just giving them a job, but that we're giving them a good job, meaning good working conditions and living wages. So for me, those 2 principles are really critical. And 11 years ago now, I started Samasource, which is now the largest AI company in Africa. We believe that there's a huge opportunity within training data. So this is an emerging field in a lot of different industries that's required for adoption of artificial intelligence. If you can go to the next slide, this is our new branding we just launched last week. We've now worked with 25% of the Fortune 50, specifically on training data. And this kind of work is really interesting because we can take someone who comes from a slum or rural background who does not have a lot of experience with computers but has finished secondary school and train them to do high quality training data work fairly quickly. And we've now achieved pretty significant scale. We employ over 2,000 people full-time and annotated over 1 billion points in 2018. And one of the things I always tell social entrepreneurs, trying to get into this space is that the social impact might matter to you. And it's certainly the reason why most of us are on this call and why we care. But the end customer really needs to know that you can deliver a high quality product or service. And so we've kind of led with the messaging of quality and scale and tech-driven efficiency. But what's in my heart and what motivates everyone who works at Samasource is the fact that we're doing this to help people move out of poverty. Next slide here. One of the things that I'm really excited about, I wrote a book a couple years ago called Give Work. And if anyone on this call wants a summary, I'm happy to share my contact information and send you like a summary if it's useful for you. But one of the things I was trying to do with that book is highlight that, especially as you get to the higher levels in the buying organizations, this was really fascinating. So the people who are in charge of signing a contract are often motivated by, I need to find a vendor that's going to deliver the work at a good quality level, and I don't want to choose a vendor that's going to cost me my job because they do a poor job of the data, in our case of the training data. But as we move higher up in the organization, as you start talking to C-level executives, as you start talking to people on the board of directors, you start hearing a lot more about the kind of legacy that individual wants to leave on their company. And at this level, often people are thinking about, what is the vision for my business 5-10 years from now? And what I found is that at that level, there's a lot of interest in impact sourcing for impact's sake. So it kind of counters what I said earlier. The person who's signing the contract needs to know you can offer a quality offering, but the person at the highest level, I think, is very compelled by real evidence of true social justice and social impact, which again, it's not impact washing. It's not saying, oh, we're working in Africa. It's deeper than that. It's saying not only are we working in a lower income economy, but we're actually hiring people that are maybe more difficult initially to hire because they come from poorer backgrounds, they have less exposure to tech or training, and then we're also paying them living wages and moving them out of poverty. So we've actually seen this as a competitive advantage in our business, and I hope it's something we see a lot more of in the industry. And again, happy to share some learnings with you all on that. I think the more we can get big companies to realize that this is a more powerful way to address poverty, inequality, even climate change, then setting some money aside and donating it at the end into a small, corporate philanthropy department that is powerless in the way the company works. I think that's the future. If we want to go to the next slide. And just in terms of scale, we are working right now on a randomized control trial. So forgive me if I'm using a lot of development nerd terms. I study development economics, so this is all really interesting to me. But one of the ways, you all might be thinking, well, it's all fine and good to say you're reducing poverty, but do you have any third-party evidence that you're actually doing that aside from what your company, publishes? So we actually are working on a study with MIT's Poverty Action Lab and a couple of professors there who are leading a randomized control trial that basically is designed to show the impact. It's sort of like a drug trial of Samasource on poverty outcomes in certain parts of the communities that we work in Kenya and Nairobi. So that data will come alive early next year as part of a long-term study that's been ongoing for a few years. But I hope to make it a model that others in our industry could follow, because we really need to prove that this isn't just hot air. We're not just doing this for marketing purposes. We're actually measurably moving people out of poverty, and we're doing a better job of it than similar types of, or not similar programs, but then other uses for those dollars, right? So we want to prove that impact sourcing is a more powerful strategy for ending poverty than donating through traditional kind of aid programs. And since we started based on our own data, we've moved 10,000 workers and their income dependent. So now that number is actually over 50,000 people out of poverty, from an average of under $2.50 a day to well over $10 a day, which is a really substantial increase in the urban neighborhoods that we work in Kenya. So excited to share that data. And we also produce learning reports every quarter or so that we publish on our website on our impact page if you guys are curious to see how we report this data. To give you a sense of what this looks like, so this is Mathare. This is a slum in Kenya that we recruit from. And I took this photograph about 4 years ago. But these guys who are standing around this river are actually, several of them are trash pickers. So they're earning their living, picking up plastic, bottles and trash from that awful place and selling it to the local recycler for about $1 a day. They're brewing a local kind of moonshine to make some extra money. 2 of these guys who are in this photograph had started university degrees in IT and had to quit because of poverty. So this is the kind of thing that young people who are educated, who are talented, who are thrilled to have a job are forced to do because there's not enough of these types of jobs for them. And it's our vision at Sama to create employment for the millions of young Africans who fall in this category and are more than capable of doing this kind of digital work, but just have never had the formal opportunity. If you want to go to the next slide. This is just a window into what it looks like in Kenya. We now have, I think we're the only facility in East Africa that has a couple of ISO certifications relating to quality. We have a number of data protection regulations, and we do a lot of our work from large centers in Nairobi, in Kampala in Uganda, and in northern Uganda. We found that our clients really care about data security, and we've been able to create a viable alternative to crowdsourcing, which a lot of our customers are concerned about because of data quality, and also frankly because I've not seen a crowdsourcing company to date that offers any sort of living wage guarantee or worker protection. So we pay for health insurance, we subsidize meals, there's a nursing room on premise. We are progressive as an employer there, and I think that there's a lot we can do to show the world that these are great jobs, especially in the communities that we're operating in. And next slide. So just a couple of ending notes here. If you guys want to contact me, here's some handles for you. But I'd love to figure out ways that we can get more companies to think about impact sourcing as a proactive social justice initiative within their companies. I can't tell you how many CEOs, when I explain what we do, they're like, I think there's an echo there. They're like, oh, I hadn't really thought about that before. I've definitely thought about corporate philanthropy and personal philanthropy, but I've never really thought that in my supply chain could be an opportunity to create impact. And I want to leave you with one crazy number that I came upon doing the research for my book. The biggest 2,000 companies in the world spend over $7 trillion on their supply chains annually. Trillion with a T. Like the entire GDP of sub-Saharan Africa is like 1.8 trillion. And the entire global aid budget to deal with poverty is like 40 or 50 billion. So if we really want to change the world, the biggest opportunity we have is in the budgets of large companies. And everyone on this call is working to get embedded in those budgets. If we can show the world that this is a powerful strategy for poverty reduction that's measurable, if we can produce objective data on it, I feel like we could drive a lot more budget to this very small but high potential industry. So really excited to be presenting this today. And if you guys want to check out more on Samasource Impact, we publish all these impact reports on our website, which we just redid at samasource.org. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Now, if we can advance the slide. I'm delighted to introduce you here to Aparna Goel, who is the Director of PeopleShores, another impact sourcing service provider, who will be sharing information about their programs both in India and the United States. Over to you, Aparna.
Thank you, Sarah. And am I audible to everybody? Wonderful. Great. So this morning I would like to share with you a little bit about what was the rationale behind launching RuralShores, where we have reached in about the 10-year journey that we have been on now, and what does success look like at our end. So I think everything began with a very simple question of why are BPO jobs in the cities of India when people who do those jobs are in the villages of India, and often migrate from those villages to the cities, have really poor quality outcomes for their life, leave the families behind, do not get to meet the children, their farms don't get worked upon, the parents age and are not taken care of. So why are the jobs in the cities, especially the kind of BPO, and why are people moving to cities? And the founding team of RuralShores, and Murli Vulaganti, who is the CEO and founder, is also on this call. So Murli, please feel free to chime in. But it all began with that simple question, and we took a leap of faith 10 years ago and decided, okay, let's take these jobs to rural India, and we did. We currently are in our 10th year anniversary and now have built successfully a large base of 20 national and international clients, servicing them across the sectors of banking, mortgage, insurance, logistics, telecom, IT, and ITES. We provide voice as well as non-voice transaction support. Just a fun number, if I may throw in, we process over 100 million transactions annually. I was just speaking to my counterpart in India day before yesterday, and a fun number that came my way was on a typical day in RuralShores across all centers, we take more than 100,000 customer calls from the telecom industry alone. 15 of our centers across the entire state of India now are operational, hiring and engaging gainfully more than 3,000 employees. We are able to provide services in English as well as in 10 regional languages, and oftentimes also through some training languages that are international. We process and support more than 100 complex processes, and needless to say, all of this in 10 years is made possible by successful achievement of service level agreements across the dimension of time and quality. Now, what may be perceived as buyers and other callers on this in this webinar is a must-do by each business, and becomes something special for likes of RuralShores is the fact that the infrastructure in villages of India is not as advanced as one would think sitting in the United States or sitting in the cities of India. So needless to say, we have now been able to successfully overcome, electric supply, Wi-Fi needs, telephony needs, and are able to provide services to all of our clients spread over the world 24/7, and meeting the SLAs of time as well as quality. Next slide, please. Thank you. How do we assess our impact as a social enterprise at a unity level, which is a youth, at a community level, which is a group of rural young and men who are employees of PeopleShores, and for our clients who are often large companies spread all over the world? I would like to speak a little bit to that on this slide. Needless to say, we have successfully stopped the migration of rural young men and women from villages to cities because they are now where the job is, or job is where they are. But also the fact that we are able to provide skill building opportunities to these rural young and men who often just have a high school degree and have learned before that in a vernacular language or a regional language school. They are now becoming proficient English speakers and are able to provide services to clients world over. And as of today, as high as 27,000 people now have passed through the funnel that RuralShores is, alongside its skill building academy and employment. The rural communities that we do work in also see change. While intentionally we are able to create change at an employee level, at a rural young man or a woman's level, we also see a lot of change happen in the communities that we operate in. Just to give you some examples, women have better social standing and financial independence because they now work with RuralShores. They seem to have a say in their family matters. For instance, what may seem obvious that, whether a house needs to be refurbished this year or not is a decision that a woman of a house will have a say in, probably is not something that's commonplace in an Indian village context. But now she gets to have that say. Overall importance on education seems to have increased at a village level, primarily because of the elder sibling is earning the livelihood by the employment in RuralShores. The younger siblings' chances of continuing their school education are increased. Several families have told us that they're coming out of debt, and we also see several small entrepreneurial ventures mushroom locally. Just to give you some fun examples of that, we see vendors often who come up with like pop-up stores to serve tea and coffee because everybody in the evening will need a coffee or a tea break. Some people have figured out this is a great opportunity for mass transport at 9 o'clock in the morning and 5 o'clock in the evening. Some people have thought that, okay, wonderful, I have now become a successful RuralShores employee and would like to become a bank manager because a large national bank has now set up a branch locally. So we do see that many peripheral jobs get created, and collectively through the change we're able to create in the communities of employees and the communities that these families are, we are able to now also do a lot of volunteering activity, be it the health camp, be it the breakfast program, or be it teaching or creating better school outcomes. Needless to say, for our clients, we provide a tremendous cost benefit. If they were to peg us against the centers that happen to be in the cities of India, we could be as high as 25 to 30% more economical as compared to the pricing that one would get at a similar or a better service level. The fact that attrition in the RuralShores is less than 10%, vis-a-vis as high as 40 to 50% in urban India, just provides the continuity that most clients seek. And all of this results primarily into innovation at each account level. Just to give you an example, we have a large online retail client, which is an account that's about 8 months old for us. And they launched an idea campaign to come up with innovative ways to provide customer enlightenment during the last 3 months. And RuralShores, along with several other vendors, submitted the ideas, 5 were shortlisted, and 2 were chosen as winners. And RuralShores, the young men and women out of villages of RuralShores, happen to be the winners of one such idea. So this just tells you the possibilities that are endless, and it just warms our hearts that we are able to create all of this impact through villages. Next slide, please. Now that the leadership team in the RuralShores is kind of stable, we have decided to, in a fun reverse import sort of a way, to launch the model similarly in the United States. And I would like to just take a minute to speak a little bit about PeopleShores. Next slide, please. Thank you. So at a very simplistic level, the raison d'etre of PeopleShores is this. On one side, there are 4.9 million opportunity youth in the United States who are disconnected from employment on one side and any kind of formal education on the other. There are several thousand veterans and spouses, and there are several thousand Native American Indians who all seek skills, economic stability, and a sense of community. And on the other side, there are several large corporates who have, as Jen and Leila both were saying, a very large outsourcing spend, and what they seek is excellence in service delivery, economic efficiency, and an opportunity to create social impact locally. We are the bridge between these two needs. We hire talent via an array of community partners, and this talent could come in the form of foster youth, homeless people, people who happen to be refugees, people who suffer domestic violence, so on and so forth. We provide them with training, we provide them with full-time employment opportunity at PeopleShores, we give them a career path that is progressive in nature. They can grow within PeopleShores or choose to become leadership in some other centers of PeopleShores as they come and mushroom. And this motivated workforce essentially gets deployed on client projects to perform IT, BPO, and digital transformation tasks. Next slide, please. Our current footprint is that we are in San Jose, California, which is where I'm dialing into this call from, but we are also present in Clarksdale, Mississippi, which happens to be one of the poorest regions, not just nationally, but also internationally. The poverty levels are actually comparable to the nation of Bangladesh. We serve disconnected young adults through both of these centers. What might seem like as an entry-level skill at back office processing or transaction processing or image tagging or facial image recognition related work is something that we definitely do, but we have tried to go over and beyond that, especially in a center like San Jose, which is smack in the middle of Silicon Valley. Several of our employees now are certified bot developers on a leading automation platform, and they surprise us with their skills and their aptitude and attitude towards absorbing newer skills every passing day. We provide them with conducive environment to grow into career professionals. And lastly, I would say none of this would be made possible in PeopleShore's context without getting the support locally from the city of San Jose, the chambers of commerce, such as in Coahoma and Clarksville County, as well as workforce development initiatives through local governments. In future, we would just not like to stop here, but also create more centers, possibly a center in each state of the United States, catering to about 10,000 people, and the opportunities we feel are endless. Next slide. Thank you. Needless to say, RuralShores has won many, many awards so far, and alongside PeopleShores, we feel that the opportunity is at least 5 million opportunity youth in the United States and several hundred villages in rural India. So we would like to have you join us in our mission and in furthering that mission as a client, as a collaborator, as a co-creator of jobs, or as a community partner. I feel the opportunities are endless, and we welcome you to join us in our mission. Thank you.
Thank you, Aparna. If you could move forward, thank you so much. Pleased to introduce you now to Evan Jones, who is the Chief Information Officer of the Youth Employment Accelerator at Harambee. Harambee, South Africa, was just last week awarded the 2019 Skoll Award for Social Entrepreneurship. So this presentation is both timely and a great example of a social enterprise that is advancing inclusive employment in a region that very much needs it. Evan, over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. And thank you to the GISC, Rockefeller, and IAOP just for affording us this platform. I'm very humbled to be in the presence of some of the other award participants and truly am impressed by the work that they do, so thank you. In terms of the presentation, I think where we are somewhat different is we exist to drive impact sourcing across a whole array of sectors and with governments and into specific countries. This particular award we submitted for our work in business process outsourcing, but we work across sectors with the specific intent to solve what we think are some very serious and significant problems, not only in South Africa, but Africa. So the slides that I've prepared really are intended to cover three subjects. The first is just to orientate the participants around the problem that we're trying to solve in Africa. And sometimes it's just we find it's important to step back and take stock of that problem because it's what gets us up every morning and gets us doing the work that we do. I'll talk more about the work we're doing in impact sourcing in terms of business process outsourcing in the context of South Africa. And what work we're doing as an ecosystem facilitator in that regard. So if I could go to the next slide, just to put forward a few points to the participants around the realities of Africa. Africa has the highest unemployment rate in the world, particularly for young people. By 2030, there will be more young people entering Africa's workforce each year than the rest of the globe combined, and that's just a frightening statistic. And by 2050, 1/4 of the world's working age population will be African, making it the largest workforce in the world. Harambee was founded 7 years ago in South Africa because we share many of the African problems. And we look to find a solution to essentially bridge these unemployed youth. And by youth, we define that as 18 to 35 into sustainable work. And over the years, we've iterated in a very agile form solutions to do that across sectors and find these youth and find the shortest, most affordable way to skill them into an array of jobs. And we are now embarking on a 10-city Africa strategy where our first location outside of South Africa is in Rwanda, in Kigali, where we've now managed to scale our model quite successfully with already over 3,500 young people in Rwanda into the economy. In terms of the next slide, the South Africa problem, which is really what this award submission was all about, the numbers are even more startling. So in a population size of 55 million, we have the highest youth unemployment rate in the world. We have roughly a 27% unemployment rate, and in number terms, in terms of youth, we have around 6 million unemployed youth. If you were to come to any one of our centers on any given day, we have 6 of them across the country, we will have several hundred of these young unemployed youth that have never had work and are excluded in our offices, and the talent that we come across is incredible. And I would agree with some of my colleagues who presented just in terms of the results that we're seeing across a whole host of sectors. Half of all high school leavers are unemployed, and we have around 1.1 million young people coming through the system, and only 6% of those are entering into formal employment. When you consider our economy on top of that, which is almost a kind of negative growth, there aren't enough jobs in the context of South Africa to absorb these young people, which really frames me around the award submission into business process outsourcing, because South Africa and its government and its partnership with Harambee have identified business process outsourcing as a key economic development sector for the country, as it represents net new employment in an economy that desperately needs it. If you go on to the next slide, please. Over the years, we have managed to scale our operations very successfully. So today, and I'll frame it more specifically in business process outsourcing in a moment, but we work, and the figure actually this week is sitting at with 500 employers. We've placed over 100,000 young people into decent work, and we've managed to connect with and about 1.7 million of these youth into our network that we are actively working with to place into the economy. How we do that, so we saw ourselves very much as an operational business in our earlier founding years, and onto the next slide, please. But we recognized, and whilst our numbers are, are fairly large, in context of the problem, they're a drop in the ocean. And a number of years back, we took a view on our strategy that if we really want to be a labor market change agent and have a meaningful dent in this youth unemployment challenge, not only in South Africa, but in Africa, then we have to move into more of an ecosystem role. And I know ecosystem management role is quite a buzzword, but really what we mean by that is how do we work with global partners? So our employer partners, there will be some logos that you recognize there that are advocates of impact sourcing and absorbing these young unemployed youth into their organizations. But more so, how do we work with knowledge and research partners, such as Duke or Harvard, who have done extensive work with us? How do we work with the technology giants of the world? And we've made some very big, significant investments in technology with organizations like Google. And I was in San Francisco at the Google conference last year, where they showcased some of how we're using technology and AI to drive impact sourcing and inclusion. How do we work with social partners? And many of our partners are from around the world, JP Morgan, USA, because youth unemployment is not a problem that is exclusive to Africa. In fact, it's becoming more and more of a global crisis. And we are starting to be recognized as a leader in scaling a model that can be replicated in many other contexts. We work very closely with our governments, not only in South Africa, but also in Rwanda, and in partnering with them, because yes, there is only so much fiscus. How can we help them channel their budgets more effectively so that we can get better youth absorption? And then many, many business and labor partners. So my introduction showed that I'm the chairman of BPESA, but that's one of our partners, and BPESA really is the industry association here in South Africa that represents business process outsourcing. And we have very much worked with them as an ecosystem partner to help capacitate them, revitalize the South Africa value proposition, start to attract foreign direct investment, because our interest in that is that it's net new jobs for the unemployed youth. So really what this slide really sets out to do is position to you our ecosystem work and how we are very partner-centric in solving a very, very big problem. If we move on to the next slide, and more specifically for the participants that have interest in outsourcing, and the South African BPO market has grown significantly over the last 5 years. It's been one of the highest growth sectors in our country and recognized by our president as such. We've seen roughly 22% growth, and that trajectory is set to double over the next 5 years. Just last week, a global group of analysts put us as the second most desirable offshore location, and it's because of the youth and the talent that exists here, and the ability to support many, many types of work in analytics, customer service, technology, and some of the brands that have come to set up here have really adopted impact sourcing at scale into their operations, supporting their international clients. You'll see some logos up at the top there, the Department of Trade and Industry. I'd like to just talk very briefly about that. So that's the agency that's responsible for attracting foreign direct investment into South Africa. They've done a great job in bringing some big brands here, but we've managed to, even as recently as this January, really get our government to become real advocates of impact sourcing. And they've actually made some policy changes at their level with the Department of Trade and Industry, where now these international organizations such as Amazon, who are enjoying grants and incentives from our government to operate here in South Africa, the government has now changed their qualification criteria for those incentives to drive an impact sourcing target. And if these organizations wish to enjoy the financial contributions, they are required to actually adopt impact sourcing. So we see this as one of the initiatives for scaling impact sourcing at an ecosystem level. And it really just demonstrates what we set out to do as Harambee to try to drive scale. My last slide is really just the business case, and this is with one of the larger outsourcers that are based here that operate several thousand offshore seats. They've been a huge advocate of impact sourcing, and they have hired candidates through our system and process. And we went through an extensive process with their CFO and their HR directors to build out what the business case is, having now placed a number of hundred candidates into their operation. And the ROI, tangibly so, is significant. I mean, through their normal sourcing channels, whether it's a reduction in attrition costs or absenteeism costs, but overall they see a 30% benefit and quite significant cost reductions and customer service improvements in their organization. So like my colleagues on this webinar, I do agree. There's tangible data, the business case stacks up. Not only is it good for our economy, it's good for business, and it's really good for the unemployed youth that desperately need this work. Thank you.
Thank you, Evan. I have a question that's come through that I'd like to ask for our first three panelists, and that is, how did you select the communities that you're working in? And maybe I can start with Intuit.
Yeah, so Intuit used a third-party site selection group along with some internal analyst research and the Distressed Community Index report that's done for the U.S. And we placed several criteria against it as well. Things like, of course, we need to make sure that there are education. There's a certain amount of at least college residencies at any given time, and a certain number of graduates in the field that we're looking for, or at least certification programs in the area. So there's several criteria within that, but we also used a third-party site selection group.
Mm-hmm. And to be clear on that, do you have requirement like education requirements for your recruiting process, or how do you think about the recruiting process to make it more inclusive?
Actually, we technically only require a high school diploma, but of course the ask would be, in addition to that, some sort of accounting experience, even if it's accounting 101 or basic bookkeeping. And then, so when we went into these areas, we looked for a rate of at least 50% graduation rate, plus some level of a certification or job experience beyond that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Layla from Samasource. The question is, how did you select the community?
I responded in the thread too, if you guys want to see it. But I'd worked in sub-Saharan Africa, and actually I was inspired to start Samasource because of an organization you guys all probably know about. I don't know if they're on the call, but Digital Divide Data, run by Jeremy Hockenstein, which is a phenomenal organization. And I actually went to Jeremy and I was like, I want to start a DDD in Africa. And he at the time was like, no, I don't think it's part of our plan, but more power to you, go for it. And he actually helped us get started. And then now DDD is in Africa, and we're together, helping grow a whole movement around this. And I really appreciated the Harambee presentation, because I feel like the Western narrative of sub-Saharan Africa is poverty, which is best addressed by charity, as opposed to talent, which is best addressed by leveling the playing field and providing opportunity. And there are millions and millions of young people who are finishing secondary school and more than capable of doing digital work. But when I started I'll never forget, I had people from big foundations tell me things like, oh, well, poor women in Africa, they need mosquito nets before they can use computers. I mean, that was a literal thing that somebody said to me from a large foundation. So we were excited about kind of changing that narrative about the continent and creating a new one about digital opportunity, and this idea of kind of leapfrogging over the traditional development path. And I will say one other thing, which is that I'm supportive of impact sourcing efforts globally, and am thrilled that RuralShores is working in the US. DDD also works in the US, because I do feel like the challenge of income inequality and the wealth gap is something we're now seeing politically, sweeping across Europe and the US. So if we don't think about the problem as a global one, and if we don't think about poverty as something that we should tackle both internationally and domestically, these problems are only going to fester. So one last note on this is just that I've been really impressed with the different development path that several East African nations are forging ahead. So in Kenya, for example, there's the emergence of this concept that development doesn't need to look like it did in China, say. It doesn't need to be potentially as environmentally destructive. And maybe by forging digital jobs, we can create high quality work that pays living wages that also doesn't destroy the environment. And that's kind of more in concert with social enterprise business models and values, which I think is really fascinating. And there's the emergence of this kind of thinking across the continent that I'm really excited about.
Thank you. And Parna, just ending with you, a question of how did you choose the sites and communities that PeopleShores and RuralShores are working in?
Right. So, the opportunities in Indian villages are endless. If I can just throw a historic number, when I was studying, India probably churns out 500,000 engineers annually. So the talent is never going to be a shortage. The shortage is going to be about understanding which village to go to. And it often starts with having like a local influencer who is able to keep the youth motivated, energized, and to make the office space available. So it often starts with like a influencer or a champion. Sometimes it starts also with a client who says, I would like to, give you an opportunity. I can be your anchor client. Can we start with this particular village? So it also sometimes starts with that. Oftentimes, we have also seen office buildings that are available and some other plant is closing, but the resource pool is talented, which is deployable for some other clients, and we would make a start from there. But I don't think ever have we felt that, finding high school graduates, which is the entry criterion for RuralShores, is going to be a constraint. I welcome all the potential clients to join us in this journey, because I don't see talent as being a shortage at all. In case of PeopleShores, I think we went with a slightly different approach. We have a relationship with an array of community partners and nonprofits. These are agencies and organizations that understand the problems of homelessness, or what it means to be a foster youth, or what it means to have a court case when you suffer domestic violence very, very well. So we work alongside them. They understand the candidate situation, and they also understand what PeopleShores is doing, and they bring PeopleShores in contact with these candidates. Needless to say, we then we interview them and then get them onboarded, and we continue to work with the community partners to provide all emotional and social and community support that the employees would need to perform their tasks in the PeopleShores context.
All right, thank you. So for the sake of time, I'm just going to accelerate the rest of this presentation on the coalition, which you are, I welcome you to please visit our website and ask me, of course, any questions that you might have about this community of practice. But first, I'd like to say the Global Impact Sourcing Award is an annual award offered by the IAOP. You do not have to be an Impact Sourcing Coalition member to apply. And we encourage anybody on the presentation who has a nascent or growing impact sourcing program to apply next year and potentially be our next awardee. So let's move to how you can get involved. The Global Impact Sourcing Coalition was founded in 2016 by 20 leading companies who wanted to advance impact sourcing as a business practice, to use the power of procurement to improve the lives and communities that they source from. And this is a coalition that has grown from 20, go ahead and move to the next slide, to 65 current members and growing. And we're constantly looking for new companies to join the effort and help us to advance impact sourcing as a business practice. As you can see, we have about 40 companies all over the world, both buyers and providers, that are working with us to create a common standard and definition for how we do impact sourcing together. These include both buyers and providers. We also have a number of associate members who support impact sourcing through advocacy and expertise. As you know, IAOP is an associate member who's helping us to advance our advocacy. Move forward 2 slides. Go ahead, one more. Last year, we launched an impact sourcing challenge, through which we encouraged GISC members to employ over 100,000 impact workers by the end of 2020. One slide prior, if you don't mind. Thanks. We're really proud to say that 1 year later, we've celebrated that 17 GISC members have stepped up to make pledges to the impact sourcing challenge, pledging to employ over 25,000 impact workers by the end of 2020. This is an ongoing opportunity for providers to contribute to the GISC challenge, and we welcome any provider members on the call, or provider companies on the call, to join the GISC's efforts and make a pledge to the impact sourcing challenge and add your name to the board here. One more. Finally, if you found this webinar inspirational, you will both have access to this webinar as a virtual recording, but we also have an upcoming event that I encourage you to participate in, which is focusing on impact sourcing in Colombia. We're doing this in partnership with ProColombia and the BPO Association of Colombia to showcase impact sourcing stories from local Colombian companies, Acento, Conecta, and Teleperformance Colombia, to demonstrate how impact sourcing and an ecosystem of buyers, providers, and government can advance inclusive employment in vulnerable regions across an entire country. You'll be able to hear again from these Colombian enterprises about their inclusive employment efforts, and I think it's a great way to learn more about the context of impact sourcing and get more colleagues involved. So please feel free to forward this to folks in your network that you think might be interested. One more slide. I'm going to wrap up with just a call to action. Any company can get involved with impact sourcing. We encourage companies to participate in the Global Impact Sourcing Coalition as a means to connect with peers and to develop your impact sourcing program building on the best practices and knowledge of this community of practice. We have companies that operate all over the world, and I think this is one of my favorite slides because it demonstrates the diversity of people that are impacted through this work. You can truly have an impact on communities from every community that you source from through going through responsible suppliers and impact sourcing. We'd be delighted to hear from you. Finally, I think 2 slides more. Fantastic. Well, thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Debbie, Ginny, Layla, Aparna, and Evan for speaking today. And we'd be delighted to hear from you after by email or however you wish to connect with us. Thank you. I'll hand back over to Nicole.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. This webinar will be recorded. You will all receive the link, and it will also be able to be found on our Knowledge Center. And if we don't have any more last-minute questions, we'll go ahead and sign off. I'll just wait a few minutes for any questions that may come in. Okay, great. Thank you so much. Everyone have a wonderful day.